as you know, in the sort of John Locke essay competition, previous essays, so previously high performing essays have always dedicated roughly a proportional split that matches the the ratio between the ratio between the titles, right? So, or ratio between kind of statements and questions in the title, right? So in other words, so as you can see, accurate news reporting is a public good. Does it follow that news agencies should be funded from taxation? Does that make sense? I don't know. Something to think about, right? So the sort of the way we want to split this is we want to kind of draw a line here and we want to answer it in two parts, right? So we form our split here and we're going to make this kind of part one and this is going to be part two. And we're going to dedicate an even amount of argument. Dedicate an even amount of argument, time and thought. Part one and two. Okay? Dedicate an even amount of argument, time and thought to part one and part two. So what are we really looking at here? The issue as well is I believe, I would say, we can't we can't move on to part two unless we first we can't move on to part two unless we first completely address part one. And this is because part two is completely reliant on part one, right? Part two is completely reliant on part one. So we have to we have to sort of verify part one before we can move on to part two. Or otherwise, we can't the question itself will never be able to develop a good answer. Therefore, it is absolutely mission critical that we gain a good understanding of whether or not accurate news reporting is a public good or not. And what you'll find in topic 2, which we will cover in 2 sessions time, and it'll be so we're going to do, we'll go through the public good fundamentals first, and then we'll look at accurate news reporting. It'll be super interesting for you to stick around with me for our second session, precisely because we're going to do a very detailed analysis of whether or not accurate news reporting is actually a public good. Okay, a very detailed and close analysis of whether or not accurate news reporting is a public good. And we will pick this apart in a very detailed way because it is a very interesting argument, and you will see that it's not it is not as simple as just confirming that accurate news is a public good and moving on. It's not that simple. Okay, just to be clear, it's really not that simple. There's a lot more nuance. There is a lot more nuance, and we must consider the very fundamental values of a public good before checking if before then checking whether or not the sort of, before checking, let's say, whether or not um these values align with sort of media provision and news. So that's the real kind of process order, right? We can't make a move on our sort of news discourse until we kind of confirm, until we totally confirm that, yeah, that, states that news as a whole actually satisfies the condition. And I'll just give you a spoiler. The answer is some accurate news satisfies being a public good, but not all accurate news satisfies being a public good. Okay. There is a very strong argumentative case for not all, for not all news being a public good, and therefore a very large amount of the essay is sort of prevented from, we're kind of prevented from moving on to question two, right? The second part of the question.